Everyone who just signed on, we're going to wait a minute or two and we'll start in a few. So thanks for holding on. Hi, everyone. I guess we can begin. It's a few minutes after 6 and I don't want to keep everybody hanging. So my name is Sam Smuha. I'm the program manager for the Richmond Hill area, working with Queens Economic Development Corporation. And we have a program where we work with the Department of Small Business Services called Avenue NYC, and we assist small businesses in the neighborhood. And I can just share briefly a little bit about what QEDC does for those who are familiar, and maybe you know small business owners, or you might be small business owners yourselves in Queens, but we run a number of different programs, and we have business advisors on our staff who help businesses for free. So we offer help with marketing, MWBE certification. We have a startup program. We've also been helping a lot of businesses apply for grants through the pandemic. So if you know anybody in need of a grant or assistance with their business, you can get in contact with us. And I'll include my information in the chat as well. And I have some social media pages that I run for to help promote businesses and events within the Richmond Hill area. And tonight we wanted to host a discussion about the QueensLink proposal, which I'll let the team do some brief introductions, and Andrew is going to lead the presentation. But as you may know, it's about the abandoned train line, formerly Long Island Railroad train line that goes through the neighborhood from the Rockaways up north. And we think it's an important discussion for the community to have now when we're talking about reactivating transit and the future of the city. And I think that it would be an important thing for the local economy within Richmond Hill and South Oakland Park and other parts of Queens. So I'll hand it off to the QueensLink team, and there'll also be a recording later on. And then after the presentation, you can ask Q&A, or you can ask questions, sorry, and you can type into the chat box if you want to leave any notes or introduce yourself as well. So I'll let the QueensLink team take it from here, and thank you very much for joining, everyone.
I guess, Paul?
Sure, I'll go first. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I really want to thank Sam and the QEDC team for hosting us as an opportunity. This is our first of what we hope is many town halls to come as we reach out to different communities along the line and in Queens and at large who will be impacted directly or indirectly through reactivation. And my purpose has been to reach out to community members and lawmakers and different organizations such as the QEDC, and just try to connect with them and to hear from the community describe the proposal and to hear feedback and to try to build support. And that's pretty much what I've been doing since I joined the team back in August.
I guess I'll go next. My name is Andrew Lynch. I'm the Chief Design Officer for the QueensLink. I've been involved with the project since about 2017. I helped sort of develop the concept, and I'm going to be giving the presentation tonight. And just as sort of a structure for the presentation, we hope it's about like 40 minutes long. I'm going to try to go pretty quickly. And so if there's any confusion or questions, throw it in the chat and we're going to address it right after the presentation. And I can go back and focus on something if that's important to people.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jonathan. I'm the outreach coordinator with the QueensLink. Since I've joined, I've been helping, very similar to Paul's job, reaching out to community leaders, elected officials, and community groups to try to build the support for the QueensLink. Also, I'd just like to add on, even during the presentation, if you have a question or a note, you can just throw it into the chat and we'll get to it as soon as possible. Yeah.
Is Rick here still? He was having some technical problems. I'm not sure if Rick's on. Rick Horan is our executive director. He helped create the QueensLink. He was one of the founding members of the Queens Rail Corporation that was fighting for reactivation. And he is one of the people that had the idea that maybe we could do more than just rail. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight. So I think without further ado, I'm going to get things started. Okay, so we just covered all of this. This is who we are. This is who the team is right now. And what we want to make clear to people is, you know, we aren't from the city. We aren't from the MTA. We are local advocates who saw something in this abandoned railroad and we wanted to make the city a little bit of a better place. Rick's a community activist. I'm a designer. I'm a transit activist. I've been writing about the subway and transportation in New York for close to 15 years now. Jonathan is a student and a political activist, and probably one day soon will be a politician himself, the way things are going. And Paul is a local musician and public school teacher. You know, we are a small team. We are looking to grow, and we are not funded by real estate interests or the racetrack or anything like that. We've had some small discretionary funds from the city. Our aim here is to very much be a grassroots, community-led project, and not something that's top down, not something that's forced down the neck of you know, the community is something they don't want. And so what we are truly aiming for right now is to get people to understand, first of all, what we're talking about, what the project is, but we want to begin this engagement. This is the QueensLink is not a final design. It is a concept. It is an idea to see if it's a hypothesis, basically. Can we reutilize this abandoned rail line that's been abandoned for 60 years, that is just rotting away in central Queens? Can we use it for transit, and can we use it for parks? As many of you might be aware of, there was a proposal 5-6 years ago to convert this right-of-way, this rail line, into a Highline style park, and that was called the Queens Way. And I'm sure many of you were at the community meetings for the Queens Way years ago. Queens Way hasn't really gone anywhere for a variety of reasons, but where we were looking at this, we kind of thought to ourselves, you know, why are there park people fighting against, you know, rail people? Like, this is a city-owned piece of land. This is a city asset. There's so much potential in this piece of land for the benefit of all New Yorkers. And it's like, why are people fighting, you know, one against the other? And so we started QueensLink really to see if we could do both. And like I said, I've been involved with the project since 2017. That's really when the concept of QueensLink began. It wasn't just, can we restore rail or can we build a park? It's, can we do both? in 2019, right before the pandemic, mind you, the MTA released a study it had been working on for a couple of years, looking at the feasibility of restoring rail on the Rockaway Beach branch, which is the line we're talking about. They looked at two options. They looked at restoring the Long Island Railroad, which is what it had been built for, or they looked at extending the subway. They found both transportation options were feasible. They even discussed possibly using land along the right of way for park space, although they didn't go into detail. But if you paid close attention, they found that the cost of building such a project would be between $6 and $8 billion. And to give you sort of an idea of what we're talking about here, this is 3.5 miles of an above ground existing rail line. There's no buildings that would need to be taken. There's a little bit of tunneling that might need to be done, but these costs below Second Avenue Subway and East Side Access, which are the two most expensive subway lines ever built in the world, out of the water. And so we kind of took a step back and said, this doesn't seem right to us. The pandemic set things back for us, but we were able to hire a third-party transportation consulting firm, and we had them look at the MTA's numbers, and we show in our report that we released this June that the MTA intentionally fabricated the costs. And this is something that we can go into detail in the Q&A. People want to get involved with that. But we found that the more realistic costs would be about $3.5 billion. And that's with all of the extra contingencies and everything thrown in there, the construction costs would probably be around $1.5 billion. So that really makes this project, while expensive, it puts it much more in sort of the terms of reality in terms of the cost for something like this. And what we'd like to keep in mind is this was a cost estimate based on the MTA's findings. The things that we as QueensLink are proposing will have different costs. We don't know the final cost of what this project is. And part of that is because we haven't designed it yet. We are looking at concepts, and we want the community feedback as to what's important to the different communities along the line to help us finalize a design and then come up with a cost for that. And so that's where we are. What are we doing, in 2022 is, this is the first of many town halls that we plan on doing, just getting feedback and understanding, what is it the community really needs. If you are joining us and you don't know what the Rockaway Beach branch was, here's a little background. It was a former Long Island Railroad line. It was the only Long Island Railroad line, the only passenger rail line that ran north-south in Queens. And that's really important because Queens developed as basically a suburb of New York City, right? Everyone was going to Manhattan or they were going into Brooklyn. And to this day, all the subway lines, all the Long Island Railroad lines, they all head into Manhattan. This was the only one that ran north-south because it was designed to serve the beachgoers on Rockaway. And it originally, after it was expanded in the early 1900s, you could get to the Rockaways from downtown Brooklyn and from Penn Station. Ridership kind of dropped after World War II. The Long Island Railroad didn't really want to keep running service on it, and they didn't invest in the line, so it fell apart. In the 1950s, the trestle that ran over Jamaica Bay caught on fire. And it was actually, of all people, Robert Moses, who rebuilt it for the city. The city bought the line and used the southern section for the A train, which is how we get to the Rockaways today. The northern section, the section that we're concerned with QueensLink, runs from Rego Park south to Ozone Park. That section kept running until 1962 as a Long Island Railroad line, when it was eventually cut. And ever since, it's been sitting there abandoned. Interestingly, ever since, people have been discussing ways to reactivate the line. The most popular plans in the past involved express trains to JFK Airport. But that faced a lot of pushback because it didn't really do anything for the neighborhoods. It was basically trains running through people's backyards, but they weren't stopping, they weren't helping anybody. So ever since, it's just been sitting there, and every few decades, it seems, somebody comes up with an idea. We are the new kid on the block. And we think that right now is probably the best time that's ever been politically to get something like this done. Let's take a quick look at what is there right now. If you haven't been around, if you don't live around the line, maybe you don't quite understand what this is. I think there's a misconception when people say, oh, it's an abandoned railroad line, oh, we can just reuse it. Well, yes and no. We can reuse the land, we can use the right of way, but it's pretty overgrown. Having been abandoned for 60 years, nature has reclaimed it. While the tracks are technically still there, if you look at the top picture, and the bridges are still there, it's going to take a lot of rehabilitation to get any use out of this. Even if this was the Queensway, the park, they were going to have to spend a lot of money to rehabilitate this thing. The bridges might be able to be saved, they might not be. That's something that has been discussed with our consultants and even with the MTA themselves. In the middle section, through south of Forest Hills, you've got where the line used to intersect with the lower Montauk branch of the Long Island Railroad. This section had a bridge which burned down, and the land has been converted into parking lots for the Forest Crescent apartment building and a strip mall that's there. It's important to understand that this is still city-owned land. This entire right-of-way, the 3.5 miles, is all city-owned except for the 9 acres which run through Forest Park. This section of land was transferred to the Parks Department. They haven't really done anything with it. They, much with the rest of Forest Park, as a forever wild style park. The railroad line is sitting there with its infrastructure just rotting away. And part of the concept with QueensLink is we're not just building a railroad line, we're incorporating park space. And what's going to be important here is if we're going to utilize this land through Forest Park, we need to replace these 9 acres with similar 9 acres somewhere else. And we think that we can do that quite well, and I'll cover that in a later part. Now, the southern section, which is a little bit more local for, I think, we're the groups that we're talking about right now, Woodhaven, Richmond Hill, and Ozone Park. It looks a little bit different than the northern section. The right-of-way is not as wide as it is up in Forest Hills. Forest Hills, the right-of-way is about 100 feet wide. Down in Richmond Hill and Woodhaven, it's much narrower. And as I'm sure many of you are aware, it runs a lot closer to people's backyards. And so that changes the equation in terms of how we can incorporate rail and parks at the same time. The only 2 physical stations that are remaining on the line are at Atlantic Avenue and Ozone Park, which was between 101st and 103rd Ave. You can see the picture of the Ozone Park station to the bottom right. Again, the right-of-way through Richmond Hill and Woodhaven is a little tight. Once you get down to south of Atlantic Avenue, the right-of-way runs basically on its own city block. It's very interesting. There's roads on both sides of it, which pushes it further away from people's homes and businesses which are along the line. And as a creative use of space, the city has rented out the area below the viaduct for auto body shops, for garages, for storage, that type of thing. And so this has been a concern with those people that we've talked to already in the past about what to do about these businesses, what to do with this space, because while these are small businesses that are local, there are issues with dumping along the line with pollution from oil spills, that type of thing. And so these are sort of like the conditions that we need to take into account. So the question I think people really need to ask is, why are we doing this in the first place? Like, what's the point of this? Why can't we just leave this be? Why do we need to do this now? And I think that for the first time in a long time, people are aware of the disparity of transit in Queens. The Queens is one of the fastest growing boroughs still of the last 20 years. And not just population, more people work in Queens than work outside of Queens. And a lot of experts think that this is going to continue after the pandemic, as more people work from home, more people find jobs closer to home as there's more economic opportunities. I mean, Long Island City 20 years ago isn't what it is today, and downtown Jamaica is growing as well. And so the transit structure that we've had, everything running to Manhattan, isn't really going to work anymore. We need to start thinking about ways, how can people get around Queens, which was very much designed for a car after World War II. How can we get around Queens without a car? Right now, it's difficult, if you're not going to Manhattan. And even if you're going to Manhattan, that's a long train ride, right? So how can we speed things up? How can we add capacity on the subways? The subways are packed. What can we do about that? The buses are crowded, even the bus lanes, which on Woodhaven Boulevard, I'm sure everyone and their mother has an opinion of what to do with that bus lane. But it's still, it's important that we have them, but it's not serving, the communities in the way they need it. Southern Queens residents literally face some of the longest commutes in the nation. They have commutes over 45 minutes. Most commuters around the country who drive, especially, have much shorter commutes, and that's why people choose to use cars, because it's just quicker. So what we're trying to do is think of a way that if we can connect Queens with better transit, we're not trying to force anyone out of their cars, right? We're trying to provide a better alternative. And that better alternative isn't just for getting to their jobs in Manhattan. It's for getting around Queens. It's for getting around the city in ways that, for like going, to shows or going to the beach, shopping in different neighborhoods that you wouldn't have been able to access. One of the things that we've heard with Woodhaven is, parking is a huge issue. Well, unless you're going to knock down people's homes to build parking lots, there's really not much more you can do. So if you want people to shop in your stores, we're going to have to find a better way to get them there. So better transit means, a lot of these local businesses are going to have more foot traffic. You're not going to have to, deal with parking issues as much. You're going to save some time, right? Like if you're not stuck on a bus that's going to take an hour to get to a train, then all that time that you've saved is time that you can use with your family, time that you can use study, time that you can use whatever you want. Right now, because Southern Queens is cut off from Northern Queens, there are job opportunities, education opportunities, healthcare opportunities that are not open to people. And that goes both ways. It's not just Southern Queens and Northern Queens. People in the North want to be able to get to neighborhoods in the South, go to the beach, get to the airport quicker, these types of things. And this is what a North-South connection is really going to allow us to do, is connect Queens in a way that is going to allow people to get around that in a way that they've never been able to before. And we think that is going to truly transform people's lives in a positive way. Just to give you an idea of what we're talking about in terms of what better transit can do. Right now, the A train from Howard Beach, just as a starting point, to 42nd Street takes about an hour. And that's on a good day. If you're trying to go at night when the trains are running every half hour, forget about it. When the MTA studied the two different options for reactivation, they studied the Long Island Railroad and they studied a New York City subway extension. While they found the Long Island Railroad line would be the quickest way at about a half hour to Midtown, to Penn Station from Howard Beach, the problem is that the Long Island Railroad main line is limited in terms of its capacity. And even with the East Side Access opening up, they calculated that there would only be about 2 trains an hour. What that means is if you miss your train, you have to wait a half hour. And so worst case scenario, it's still going to take an hour to get to Midtown. We as QueensLink are proposing extending the New York City subway. We have chosen the M train. We think that it would be in a more appropriate train. And I can go into some more detail about that later. The M train, even though it runs local on Queens Boulevard, would still be the fastest option. It would take about 45 minutes to get from Howard Beach to 42nd Street, and it would run at a much higher frequency. It would run every probably 6 to 8 minutes. So you wouldn't be stranded out in the Rockaways. You wouldn't be stranded in southern Queens, you could get around a lot more reliably. And this is what we're talking about in terms of the link in QueensLink. What is it going to do? It's going to link together with one seat ride, Manhattan, Long Island City, Jackson Heights, Elmhurst, the Queens Center Mall, and southern Queens like Woodhaven, Ozone Park, JFK Airport, and the Rockaway. The benefit of the subway connection over the Long Island Railroad connection isn't that you're just saving time, it's that you're connecting to other places. It's through this network, this incredible subway network that we have, through one transfer, you can get to downtown Jamaica, or you can get to Flushing, you can get to the Bronx, you can get to downtown Brooklyn in a faster way. Like this one line, which is going to act basically as a crosstown connection, is going to fundamentally change the ability for people in Queens to get around Queens, and not just on transit, but locally too. Like if you don't need to drive, why would you drive? The idea, the concept that we have come up with is simple, but there are a lot of different options. And so I want to present a few of the ideas we're working with. And keep in mind, these are just ideas. Nothing is being proposed, but we wanted to see what was possible and then see, what would benefit the community most. So the way that the subway line would work is it would branch off the Queens Boulevard line at 63rd Drive. And at 63rd Drive, when they built the subway line in the 1930s, they had an idea to connect it to the Long Island Railroad Rockaway Beach branch. So they built tunnels underground that are currently unused for this connection. And we would connect the Queens Boulevard line using these new tunnels with the Rockaway Beach branch. Once it runs south of the Long Island main line, there's a few different options. And the reason there are a few different options is because we want to understand the different ways that we could utilize the land of the right-of-way. We could keep the embankment as it is, with maybe using a little bit of the land on the side where possible. It would basically have the lowest amount of park space. We could take the embankment that's there, shore it up, reduce it in size. It doesn't have to be as big. And that way we can use the land along the right-of-way for like a bike path, walking path, that type of thing. A more aggressive option is we can remove the entire thing. The thing that is the land that's built there, we can demolish the whole thing and we can build a smaller elevated concrete structure that is going to allow us to open up the land that's below. And then the last option is to tunnel most of the way. And the new embankment and the tunnel are obviously going to be much more expensive, but the trade-off is we think that we can create much more usable space. And then after the M train is extended along this line, however it looks, it's going to connect to the A train and serve the Rockaways. And so with a 3.5 mile connection, we're going to actually be building a much longer subway line, which is going to serve the network better. This is a schematic kind of showing what we're talking about here. This is how the subway would look. It would, pull south after 63rd Drive and run all the way to the Rockaways. Now, on this map, we have it going to Rockaway Park. You could go to Far Rockaway as well. That's something that would need to be studied, based on ridership, that type of thing. One of the concerns that people have had up in the north is if we do this, we're going to be taking away service from Forest Hills, and they're right. But what this is going to allow us to do is, because we're removing one train from Forest Hills, we're going to be able to open up unused capacity on that subway line, because the bottleneck is really the station at Forest Hills. You can't turn that many trains there. It's a poor terminal. But if we take away 10 trains an hour, we're going to be able to add 10 trains an hour. And so we think this is going to be a way that the G train can finally be returned to Forest Hills, where it used to call home. And this, through this little trick that we've got using this extra capacity, we're going to be able to boost subway service both on Queens Boulevard and obviously in the Rockaways. And this is kind of the little trick that we're playing is we're not just extending a line into a neighborhood and we're serving that neighborhood, we're strengthening the existing network that's there, and we're adding more capacity. So even if you're never going to take this line, even if you're never going to ride it, there's going to be subway improvements, further down the line that you'll be able to benefit from. These are some early renderings that we've done. Keep in mind, nothing is final. These are just concepts. This is showing Fleet Street up in Forest Hills. This is what we were talking about. If we did the minimal type of investment, we would have the train coming out of the subway, which would be built down to Fleet Street. And it would come up to the embankment and it would run down along the line the way it used to. And the land along the right of way, we could add paths or do whatever with, but it would have a very minimal amount of new new park space. The more aggressive concept is to replace that earth embankment right there with this concrete elevated structure. If any of you have taken the air train to Jamaica, or from Jamaica to JFK Airport, this is exactly what we're talking about. It's smaller, it runs on concrete piers, it's quieter, you don't have the noise of the elevated trains that we have today. And the most important thing is, because this right of way is so large, but today it's used for this earth structure, by removing that, we open up all of this land below. And you can have walking paths, you can have playgrounds, you can have whatever under there. And the final option, the most expensive option, is if we were to extend the subway tunnel, which needs to be built to connect to the Queens Boulevard line. If we can extend that south to however far south we need to go, all that land that is being used currently for the embankment can be opened up for a parkway, and this parkway could connect northern and southern Queens. And now these are starting points. Where we want to go from here is to talk with you guys about the ideas that we just presented of how to incorporate the subway transit with new parks, with what is it the community really needs. We just had a starting point of, hey, can we do this? Oh, okay, we think we can. Well, if we build something out there, it's going to disrupt things. So how can we do this that helps these communities in the ways that they really need to be helped? And the only way that we're going to understand that is with talking with the communities and engaging such as this. And that's what we're really excited about right now is, here's our idea, but what is it you guys really need? Some of the concerns that we've heard in the past with our meetings with politicians, with community groups, is, sort of day-to-day issues, quality of life issues. People are obviously concerned about, if we restore a rail line here, that's going to be loud. How do we deal with that? How is traffic going to be handled? Are we going to have more traffic? We're going to have less traffic. The idea is we have less traffic. How do we handle that? Right now, if you walk along this abandoned railroad line, you're going to see people use it for dumping. There's crashed cars that are just lying there with glass everywhere. There's literally, this is a picture that Paul took, just the other day on his walk. There's a mattress there, there's trash there. These are just basic quality of life issues that how can building this line address these things? If the line itself, technically being city owned, if you go up there and walk around, you're trespassing. And a lot of people go up there, they're having parties, they're drinking up there, they're doing whatever, but they're leaving trash, and that attracts, animals. It's just unsightly. So if we restore service on this, we're going to be able to keep people off this line. We're going to be able to keep the trash down, that type of thing. Safety is a huge issue, not just locally. Obviously, right now, I think a lot of people are acutely aware of, safety on the subway. And so how can we address that? How can we build the subway line, the subway stations with, closed circuit cameras? Can we involve the local police in some way? More people using the subway are going to create more eyes on the ground, which hopefully creates a safer environment. So these are things that we're interested in. And as the line goes through Forest Park, maybe we can help the local residents who we've talked to express concern over the lighting in Forest Park. So, how can QueensLink address the lighting issue in Forest Park. The businesses along the right of way. If we're improving transit, theoretically, we're going to be having more people coming to these businesses, but it also might mean that landlords get greedy and they might want a rent increase. So what's that going to look like? What are the concerns of local businesses that they have now? And if this is built, what do they think it's going to help or hurt their businesses? So we want to understand that. There we go. So I want to get this right out of the way. What we are proposing is not the J train. The J train is one of the loudest structures I've ever stood underneath. And when you talk about the subway in New York, especially out in Queens, where the subways were built 100 years ago, people have a very visceral understanding of what is there now. And what's really disappointing is because New York has been so bad in expanding its transit system, is people don't understand that there is a better way. There are modern solutions out there. These include, like I said, the train that is there now is built on an earth embankment. It is not built on a steel structure. Most of the sound that you're hearing when the J train goes over is because it's resonating through that steel structure. It's going around curves very sharply, and it's the wheels are squeaking. That wouldn't be the case with an earth embankment because the earth itself is going to deaden the sound. Another thing that we can do is build sound walls, sound barriers, the way that you would see on modern highways. These are going to, especially where the line runs pretty close to people's backyards, it's going to not just keep the noise down, it's going to keep people from being able to look into their homes, which is kind of creepy, right? The modern concrete structures that we were talking about, that's very much like the air train. They don't have the same sound issues that the old steel elevated structures have. They're much quieter. Even if you go to check, if you walk down to see the air train along the Van Wyck Boulevard, when that thing goes by, you don't hear it. And it's not because of the highway that's there. So these are some of the modern techniques that we think could be utilized to keep sound down, to keep the visuals down. And then one of the really interesting things that we found while doing research for this project was the Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago built a library underneath an elevated train. And to keep the sound pollution down in the library, they built a tube. They basically built an above ground subway tunnel around the existing elevated structure so that when students are studying in the library, they're not disturbed. And while this would be more expensive, we also think it might be a very interesting and novel approach to dealing with this train, which would run, if the train's running above ground, this could be an interesting way to sort of keep it out of sight, out of mind. We are acutely aware of the issues with the environment right now, especially after the flooding from the hurricane last year. A lot of people in this area of Queens, all over the city, but this area of Queens dealt with flooding. People in the Rockaways remember Hurricane Sandy like it was yesterday. And so people understand that, going forward, we need a more sustainable way to get around the city we have now, but also build out the city that we want in the future. Woodhaven Boulevard and to a lesser extent, the Van Wyck Expressway, they're parking lots. And these parking lots mean that not only are these streets unsafe, but there's a lot of pollution that runs off, that goes into the local water, that gets into Jamaica Bay, that makes the bay less healthy, which makes it less resilient when there is a storm. And so, improving the quality of public transportation in Queens is going to have a ripple effect in the environment of the city. And now we're not talking about like, oh, the ice caps and that type of thing. No, this is your environment, your home, your streets. It's going to reduce, air pollution, and so even if you don't live along this line and you don't think it's going to affect you, there's going to be less pollution in the air, and you're gonna have a healthier life because of it, right? So I want to sort of go into a little bit more of how we're going to come up with this new park space, because in New York, like I said, we don't build things anymore, and so people don't understand that there's a better way. In cities around the country and around the world, building park space with new transit is actually pretty much the way things are done. And just in New York, we haven't figured that out yet. So here are two examples of what we think it could look like based on other alternatives in Atlanta on the bottom right. The MARTA system runs on this modern concrete, quieter viaduct, and they've built park space underneath it. This is a soccer field. In the BART system in California, in the Bay Area, they built a lot of it along abandoned freight lines, and instead of building it, on the ground, they elevated it in the same way that we're kind of talking about it in certain places, and they built bike paths and walking paths. And so, it's not this either or. It's not parks versus transit. It's how do we do both? Because really, in doing both, it's how we are going to be able to help create more sustainable neighborhoods, and help build a better future. And so, to get very specific, these are kind of the ideas that we're looking at for especially the section in Ozone Park. The viaduct that runs between 99th and 100th Streets there, that has the auto body shops and the garages underneath. What could that look like if we were going to utilize? We're going to put the trains back, but also utilize this land for a better public space. One would be to replace the entire thing with this modern viaduct and use the city blocks underneath for park space. We could have basketball courts or running courts, bike paths, these types of things. Or we could keep that structure there and reuse those stalls for a marketplace, a farmer's market, local business, retail, that type of thing. And in case anyone's wondering, this has been done before. This is a rendering of a project in Lynn, Massachusetts, underneath a viaduct which runs through the center of town, which carries the commuter rail that goes to the North Shore of Boston. And in about 2019, 2020, they reimagined what it would be if they could use this space underneath the viaduct with active trains running. And they built it out. With the pandemic, it's obviously not as active as they'd like, but they hold farmers markets here. There are stalls for shop. And so we think that this could be a really interesting creative use for the viaduct that runs through Ozone Park, which would allow not just like better outdoor space, healthier space, but also provide retail, provide place for local businesses. And then taking a step back, how we're going to find these 33 acres? Well, we're talking about is up to 33 acres. It might not be 33 acres, it might be 10 acres, it might be 20. It's all about what is it that the community needs in this project, so we can figure out what these local parks could look like. If you don't want a local park, hey, that's fine. That's fine with us. But we're here to begin that conversation of, let's use this land better. We think that there are a lot of local benefits, not just for the greater city, but specifically Woodhaven, Richmond Hill, and Ozone Park. The first is if we clean this line up, we're going to address the dumping that's along the line. We're going to have people along the line. We're going to have parks and bikes, anything that can bring people into the right of way. Through this, we can help clean it up, because there's going to be eyes on the street. There's going to be trash cans. There's going to be better lighting. There's going to be for the stations, like I said, closed circuit cameras. Bike parking. The stations themselves will be ADA compliant with elevators, these types of things. And so there's going to be, instead of just a derelict site here, there's going to be an active space. This is going to help us bring people to the hospitals. It's going to help healthcare workers, home healthcare workers, get to people's homes faster, get to jobs faster. It's gonna help support development, transit-oriented development, especially down in the Rockaways right now. And we also think it's gonna help a lot of the local businesses, a lot of the ethnic enclaves here that there are a lot of people in New York City who love living here because they have access to food that they would have never experienced before, such as Little Guyana. Jackson Heights, it's very famous. And so to be able to connect these via mass transit, making it easier for people to get to these businesses, we only think that's going to be a good thing. And even the businesses that are just local, we're going to have more foot traffic, especially on Jamaica, Liberty, 101st, those types of places. It's going to, like I said, it's going to be easier to get to Jamaica Center. It's going to be easier to get to Aqueduct Resorts World, job centers like that. It's going to be easier to get to the beach. If you live in northern Queens right now and you want to go to the beach, you got to drive, or you got to take up 2 buses, something like that. That's gonna help the local economy in ways that I think people really need to understand. Like it's gonna help the local economy of all of Queens. The question that inevitably comes up is, how are you gonna pay for it? So like I said at the beginning, we're looking at cost idea of about $3.5 billion. All of this is going to be dependent on what the final design is going to look like. Well, for the first time in a long time, there's some money out there. Congestion pricing has been spoken for. Those funds have been allotted to the MTA's capital campaign. However, we need to make sure that the outer boroughs get their due. If you're going to be charging people to drive into Manhattan, forcing them onto local subways, which are already packed or already have terrible service, what are we getting for our congestion pricing money, right? And so we think QueensLink is an excellent opportunity to say, hey, this is the investment or one of the investments you need to be making. The federal transportation bill, the infrastructure bill that just passed, there's money for projects. It's not just what's out there. I mean, the bill was written a little bit open-ended so that other projects, not just ones that are already federally approved, might be able to be considered. Locally, we think that there's opportunities through bonds or tax increment financing, payment in lieu of taxes, schemes like that. These have worked in places like Hudson Yards. And just to be very clear, we are not talking about building Hudson Yards in Central Queens. That would never happen. That couldn't happen. But the financing structure might be able to be utilized where over, say, like a 30-year period, this would be able to be paid for. When people say, oh, it's too expensive, we can't do it, I'd like to remind people that the city budget is about $100 billion a year. And if this takes 5 years to build, it would only be a few $100,000 a year to build. It's about putting these things into context. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if people don't want it, it doesn't matter what it costs. They're not going to pay for it. And so what we have to do is find the project that people want, and then we can figure out the different ways that we can possibly pay for it. We are, besides the Q&A we're doing right now, we want to hear from everybody. We want to understand what the community needs, what the city needs. We want to understand your concerns, your ideas, these types of things. So we want feedback. We want to create this conversation. We want more people talking about QueensLink. And so what we'd love is, if you want to get, we're going to do some questions and answers after this. But if you want to know more about this, go check out our website. We have a newsletter that we send out, sign up for that. We're very active on social media. Get us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, these types of things. And so we want people to understand and to question and to be engaged with us. So the question that we ask finally is, where can the QueensLink take you? Thank you very much. Okay. So let's see, I haven't been able to look at anyone's questions. So maybe Paul or Jonathan, if you've got some questions lined up, let me know.
Yeah. we had a question regarding just re-explaining the Forest Hill service.
What do you mean?
About how the the increased capacity. I believe Miriam was asking about how does that actually work with the increased capacity and allow
Sure.
for possibly the return of the G.
Let me let's see here. Okay, that's not gonna work. Give me 1 second. Oops. Let's see, rotate counterclockwise. Okay, sorry. Let me share my screen again. Okay, so this is really kind of like wonky. And so if you don't totally understand, let me know. I'll try to like dumb it down as much as possible. When we talk about capacity on a subway line, there's really two factors that are involved. You've got the signal system, which keeps trains at a certain distance apart, usually for safety reasons. And that determines how many trains can be operated through the tunnel. Then you've also got the terminal, you've got the station. And at a normal state, let's say there's 2 tracks and 1 platform, like when a train is coming into that terminal, it can use either track. That's gonna allow 2 trains to operate through that station as opposed to if there was only 1 track. And the reason that this is important is if you go to Forest Hill Station and you watch the way the trains come in, all the local trains are using 1 track. They're not using 2 tracks because they can't cross all the way over. They have to come in, they have to unload, and then they have to leave, go further down into the layup tracks and then come back. That entire process takes about 1.5 minutes. And the reason that it takes in taking 1.5 minutes, that means that all the trains behind it need to wait. And because they need to wait, that limits how many trains per hour can operate through that tunnel. Right now, because of the way those trains are operated through Forest Hills, you can only really run about 20 trains an hour through the local tracks of the Queensboro subway line, or the Queens Boulevard subway line, sorry. And that's what the levels of service that the M and the R currently run. And if you look at this, the tunnels themselves with the existing signals, and I'm not talking about the fancy new computer signals that they installed, I'm talking about like the existing signals. You can run about 30 trains an hour. And so there's a discrepancy of 10 trains an hour that is we're unable to run because they can't turn them any faster at Forest Hills. And so that's what this gray line here represents. You got the 2 subway services and this unusable capacity. So what we're proposing is if you build a branch off of this tunnel, you can fit in those extra 10 trains because they don't need to turn here at Forest Hills. The M train's going to go down to the Rockaways. So that unusable capacity becomes usable. And so we're going to be able, that's how the G train's going to be able to go back. It would be probably more beneficial if the R train and the M train saw boosted levels of service, but there's other bottlenecks in the system which prevent that from happening. And so we think that until those other issues are dealt with, which is a topic unto itself, that the simplest solution here is to restore the G train to Forest Hills. As someone who's lived in Brooklyn off the G train, I would love it if they, gave that train a full length. Like 4 cars ain't enough, especially at rush hour. And so if this was to go back to, Forest Hills, we think it would be a way that we could add, replace the service that has been going to Forest Hills, and also boost service along the rest of the subway line through Queens. And it would also help all the, the people that want to switch to the G, would have to go all the way to Court Square. And so that would keep people, off of some of the express trains perhaps. So I hope that clears it up. If not, I guess you hit me up after and I can, break it down even further. Okay, next question.
Our next question was from Helen, and she asked, where would the stations be located? along the new part of the route.
Along the new part of the route. Okay, let me show this station here. And so we are basically right now just proposing going back to what the original stations were on the Long Island Railroad line. There were 4 stations originally: the Metropolitan Ave up here between Rego Park and Forest Hills, Jamaica Ave, the Atlantic Ave station, and the Atlantic Ave station. It's very interesting. We're also proposing reopening an abandoned Long Island Railroad station, which is underground along the Atlantic line. So that way, riders will be able to either get to downtown Jamaica or Long Island faster, or downtown Brooklyn quicker than taking like the A train today. And then the final station was at Ozone Park between 101st and 103rd Ave. We're proposing moving that 1 block south to Liberty Ave so that riders of the A train would be able to transfer there. This is something, that we can discuss with, depending on how people want to use this line, especially because it's going to affect, the businesses along 101st Avenue. It would benefit them to have that station there, but there's also the benefit of the riders coming off the A. So, that's something that we're going to take into account. And what's going to be important with these stations is they allow for the transfers to the existing subway lines. And like I said, if we reopen the Woodhaven station, it's going to allow for transfers to the Long Island Railroad line. That's where a lot of the benefit of this subway line comes in. It's not, like I said, it's not just about getting to Midtown Manhattan faster. It's about where you can get secondarily.
Then the next question related on that issue was from Nolan. He asked, why would the Liberty Avenue stop would transfer with 104th Street instead of Rockaway Boulevard?
Simply because 104th Street is closer. Rockaway Boulevard is a few hundred feet further away, and if you go there today, the junction that they built so that the A train can travel south to Howard Beach and to Rockaway makes it more difficult. But if we do a traffic study on how people are going to use this, and we find that more people would utilize this at Rockaway Boulevard, similarly up on the J train, Woodhaven Boulevard versus the 104th Street station, then we could potentially put in a transfer there. It's just that if we put it in at 104th Street, those stations being closer to the line, we'd be able to build a physical connection, basically sort of like an above ground tunnel basically between these 2 stations. One of the things that we don't really want to do is have people transfer via the street. That's going to reduce the amount of people that are going to use the connections. And so we think that if we can connect these stations to the closest station and with an in-system transfer, that it's going to be a lot more useful and a lot more convenient. So that's why we propose 104.
And then Jason asked, does the expansion of the M line into the Rockaway Peninsula eliminate the need for the shuttle, or will it act as a supplement?
It will eliminate the need for the shuttle. That was one of the original ideas that we had, was we just replace the shuttle entirely with the M train. However, we also would want to consider maybe sending the M train to Far Rockaway and then shifting the A train to Rockaway Park. All of that is going to be based on what the ridership levels look like. But yes, it will replace the shuttle.
And Karen had 2 questions,
Right.
multiple. She asked about the construction. How will pests and rodents due to the construction be dealt with? Public safety, and the contingency plans regarding construction as well.
So I'm assuming this means, so when construction happens, there's going to be noise, dust, these types of things. In recent projects such as the Tappan Zee Bridge, even Second Avenue Subway, one of the really successful things that the MTA did was create this outreach department, which acted as sort of a middleman between the construction crews and the local communities. And we think that would be appropriate here too. Basically, they would set up shop at, you know, a storefront somewhere, and there would be one person or a group of people that you could go to if there was a problem. Say, hey, you know, I remember part of when the Tappan Zee Bridge was being built. Some homes nearby had like their window shatter, and the MTA was able to quickly replace those. And so we see that type of community outreach as being key. However this is built, if it's built by the MTA, maybe it's built privately or it's built by the city, whomever builds it, we're going to make sure that that type of like face-to-face, so that you, like if you have a problem, if there's rats, which, you know, we can reduce that with like putting poison or some sort of trap, something like that. You know, if there's an issue, you're going to have someone that you know personally that you can go to and say, hey, I've got this problem, and they can help you out like right there. There's no getting around it. You know, construction can be messy. And so we're not going to try to like say it's going to be all sunshine and rainbows here. Like but the construction is temporary. And the benefits of this is going to be, you know, long-term. So how do we, you know, take the pain away from that type of construction? And like I said, having a sort of a community outreach arm of this project is going to be key.
Karen also had another question specifically about the businesses on
Sure.
that Ozone Park viaduct. She asked, will that mean that we're going to be evicting those business owners?
So that viaduct, if anything is ever going to happen, those businesses will need to be relocated. The structure itself will need to be rehabilitated. There are also known soil contamination issues with the Department of Environmental Protection. So yes, those businesses will need to be relocated.
Another thing I like to add to that, but we've also discussed possibilities of helping those businesses relocate as well with tax credits and government subsidies to help them with that process, because it's also my father's a small business owner. We understand like that issue of you know, being forced out and always on the threat of eviction, rent hikes, stuff like that. Yeah.
To clarify what's happening there, like I said, the entire right-of-way, including that viaduct, is owned by the city. Those businesses have month-to-month leases, and those businesses, even the Logan Bus Company that's there, we would be very, you know, interested in working with them to find a solution that could work for all parties, if they stay, if they go. But yeah, if this is going to be fixed, then, you know, we need to approach those businesses and say, how are we going to make this work? So it's definitely something that we are aware of and, you know, want to make sure that we can handle with care.
David asked a question regarding the M interlining with many lines here.
Yeah.
He was asking, because it shares tracks with the J, F, E, G, and R and A trains. He said, wouldn't that increase the chance of bottlenecks and delays?
Every time there's a merge, yes, you have an increase in that. However, until there is a better way, there's not much more we can do. And I kind of alluded to that when I was talking about the M and the R being limited. You know, if we could increase service on the M and the R today, that would be the simplest solution. But because there's all these other issues throughout the system, and this is getting, like I said, super wonky, the M, like he said, is limited through all these other lines that, you know, lines with the R, same way. So it's sort of the best we can do until we have a complete reevaluation of how we run train lines throughout the entire network. So yeah, it would be an issue, but it wouldn't be any worse than we have today. Let's put it that way.
Tom had a question regarding the MTA cost estimate.
Sure.
He asked if it's political in nature and is there a hope for a new estimate under the new governor?
Our understanding of the sandbagging was that the study that the MTA put out was finished in 2018, and we know this because if you go on their website and download it, it says it right on the front cover, 2018. It was released in October of 2019. We believe that the MTA, which had never really wanted to do the study in the first place, sandbagged it because they didn't feel that they had the resources necessary to undertake the project. I mean, they still had East Side Access going on, and now we're in this position where we have a whole new slate of projects, Second Ave Subway Phase 2, the Interborough Express, the Penn Station Access, all these types of things. So without a political champion, the MTA is not going to do anything on their own. The Interborough Express is an old idea that's been championed by the RPA since the 90s, and all of a sudden they're on board because this is what the governor does. And so it was less political and more sort of pragmatic, why I think they swept the report under the rug. But all we need is a champion right now, and I'm encouraged by this governor now, who for the first time ever of any governor in my lifetime has actually proposed, helping the outer boroughs with transportation. And so we don't see these two projects necessarily as competition. We see them as complementing one another. So yeah, if we could get, the governor on board, this thing would be on the fast track.
Corinna asked a question of why not use a different type of train versus subway train, like a light rail?
Sure. So, in the past, other options, transportation alternatives have been proposed for this line: bus, rapid transit, light rail. Light rail that sort of runs on its own track by itself isn't necessarily that much better than, let's say, bus rapid transit, which is designed properly, which the Woodhaven Boulevard bus rapid transit is not. It costs more and it's about just as effective. The reason that we have chosen the subway is because it connects you to this greater network that we already have, and it strengthens the existing network. If you were to just build a one-off light rail line, it wouldn't necessarily be faster than the bus that we have today. It wouldn't save you much time because you still had to wait 20 minutes for the A train before you can transfer. And likewise, it wouldn't save much time on Queens Boulevard. You would have to transfer 2 or 3 times. And every time you transfer, that adds a lot more time. And so extending the subway, utilizing the network that we already have right now and strengthening that network is part of the real value of the QueensLink versus building like a one-off light rail line, or even using the Long Island Railroad. It would just be a branch of the Long Island Railroad. This way, we're doing a lot more with what we have.
I think Karina also asked, why did you choose the M? It's already a very long line.
The M actually isn't that long. The R is pretty long, and that's why we chose the M. Because if we had extended the R as opposed to the M, it would be the longest subway line in the city, and it would be local the entire way. So the other option was the M, which, because it goes into Williamsburg, Bushwick, and back into Queens, it's shorter, and it would still be, I think, about the second longest line in the city, but it wouldn't be the longest. That's why.
There was another question.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you go, Jonathan.
How would converting Woodhaven Boulevard to Queens Boulevard affect commute times or capacity for existing riders using the E and F?
All right. So this is something that we didn't really cover in this presentation. It's an extra little piece of the puzzle that we are proposing. And if you look at this map that I'm showing, the Woodhaven Boulevard station on Queens Boulevard is currently a local station. We are proposing converting it into an express stop. We propose this for a couple of reasons. Some people have asked us why we don't extend the E or the F down to the Rockaways so that service down there can be even faster. The simple answer is that the existing tunnels that were built so that this would be a branch off of the local track only. if we were to build an extension, let's say of the E, that would hurt the riders that were coming from Jamaica, and it would also, just cost a lot more to rebuild that whole subway line. And it wouldn't really add that much more benefit. It would actually do more harm than good. So to strike a balance, we think that if we were to take the local Woodhaven Boulevard stop and convert it into an express stop, which if a lot of people don't know this, it was actually built for that function, that future function. There are provisions in that station so that it could be expanded a little bit easier. We'd be able to save people even more time. Now, the question is, how would that affect current riders that are taking the express from Forest Hills to Roosevelt Ave? Well, if you take that line, you know that when you get to Roosevelt Ave, everyone is trying to get onto that express train. And there's so much crowding at Roosevelt Ave that it actually delays trains. And a lot of that crowding is coming from people that were on the locals at stations such as Woodhaven Boulevard that are switching to the express. And so what we think is, if we can convert Woodhaven Boulevard to an express stop, we're going to cut down a large percentage of those people transferring. So the delays that are at Roosevelt Avenue are going to be eliminated. And those delays are so bad that they actually add like a couple minutes to each train's run time. And so that being offset with a new stop at Woodhaven Boulevard, we don't think that that's actually going to reduce, or I'm sorry, it's not going to increase the overall travel time. If anything, and best case scenario, it's exactly the same, but there's fewer delays. So there's the trains are more, they run more frequently, that type of thing. And you have the benefit of all those people that would be served at Woodhaven Boulevard that have to transfer. Now they don't have to transfer. And so we think, while it might sound like it's making people's trips longer, that would actually make people's trips quicker.
I don't see any more questions. If you have any questions, just put it into the chat. Paul, I don't know if you have.
I've been trying to keep up with crossing off every time you hit one. There's a couple maybe that I think haven't been addressed. One was from Kieran. If I'm saying that correctly, apologies if I'm not. Why only one station between Queens Boulevard and Forest Park?
Just because that's where the original station was. If we, engage with the residents of Rego Park and Forest Hills, and they say, hey, we want a station at Fleet Street or somewhere else, we're open to it. Metropolitan Ave is the only east-west avenue out there that has any type of bus service. It's also a commercial corridor. It's the only commercial corridor out there. None of the streets further north have any real commercial use. And so, it's not like we're not open to it. It's just, hasn't really come up.
And I guess along that line, Nolan mentioned that, said selfishly, I would love a stop at 101st. It's a, kind of a struggling business district that could use the revitalization.
If keeping the station at 101st Ave as opposed to moving into Liberty helps more people, then we're on board. None of these stations right now are dots on a screen. We're trying to narrow down sort of like the best way that we can really build this out. So yeah, if you want to keep it at 101st, that's fine.
And how about the possibility of both, Andrew?
It wouldn't make sense. They'd be, we're talking about literally a block difference. So it wouldn't make sense to have one at Liberty and 101st.
Okay, there's Karina was also asking about Logan Bus specifically, and what would have to happen with that.
Let me see if I can bring up a Google Maps and I can show you guys Logan Bus. So we were speaking to some people about Logan Bus. Logan Bus, let's see, there it is. Logan Bus is very interesting. All right, let me share my screen here. So right here, you see this is the Logan Bus depot. And the reason that it's on this crescent shape here is that this is the original, this is the place where the Long Island Railroad, which runs under Atlantic Avenue, branched off and connected down to the Rockaway Beach branch. So you could have service to Rockaway from Penn Station and from downtown Brooklyn. And so when the Rockaway Beach branch was abandoned, they abandoned this section too. And so today, this land over here and this section right here along 100th Street is used for parking buses, as you can see. The minimum amount of land that we would need is along 100th Street right here. And so it would be this section of the bus depot, the bus parking lot here. If in some way that would work for Logan Bus, then we can keep Logan Bus there. If that doesn't work, then we could discuss something else, utilizing this land maybe with a parking garage. There's we were considering also using available land out near JFK Airport. But again, it's having this conversation with these local businesses. They're not just like parking lots here. These are local jobs, and we're completely aware of this. So it's about what's going to work best for everyone. If the bus depot can't stay there, what is the best alternative for that? And so we're definitely going to be able to study that type of issue, like if we need to keep it there. If the other thing too that we brought up is, let's say this area right here, which is all we need for the right of way, if we could rebuild that with that modern elevated viaduct that I talked about, the concrete and that like the air train, all that land underneath you can still use for parking buses. And so, there are creative ways that we can address this problem. And we are interested in talking with the city and Logan Bus of basically finding like a common ground there. So yeah, there are ways that we could keep it. If they wanted to move to better digs, that would be that would be up to them. So, but again, there are things that we can do creatively here to address this.
And if Logan Bus, if we pointed out other areas that we've spoken to some lawmakers about of a possible move to, that maybe by better mass transit for workers to get to and from, or also like more like by the highways for people to get to and from, and for the buses to head out. That land could be converted into like probably one of the bigger park spaces that I believe we've talked about in the proposal. And as we know, Ozone Park doesn't quite live up to the name of park. Unfortunately, it doesn't. It could use more park. So again, it really comes to the dialogue of we're not trying to force a plan on anyone. We advocating for the reactivation, and we have options and flexibilities that go along with our proposal. That's where we're talking to the businesses and communities, such as our outreach right now to all of you.
Right. Is there anything else?
As far as I might have missed a question or two, but I think Miriam was just contemplating how close the M comes to a full loop. Like, would that ever be possible to connect it?
It might be. It probably wouldn't be the best idea transportation wise, but yeah, I'm not going to lie, it's a little confusing. The M is kind of circle back, but it's not going to create a full loop. Interestingly, we have a map here of the there we go. All right, let me show you this. There we go. So this right here, we put this map together. It shows the QueensLink, which is over here, 3.5 miles, and this is the governor's new proposed Interborough Express. And so you can see here that with the Interborough Express, at the closest point they come together is about 1.5 miles, which for walking isn't really great, ideal for transit. But you would be able to get here where it ends in Middle Village and get up to Jackson Heights. So, in terms of the transit, getting in a loop in using transit, it would be possible. But to connect the M from Middle Village down here probably just wouldn't make the most sense. That's my opinion. other people might have a different opinion, but that's my opinion.
There was another question I found that we don't think it would be addressed, and I know this is a bit of a rabbit hole, is Helen was wondering that why is there such a difference between the MTA and the QueensLink budget?
We believe that the MTA did not want to build this, and without a political sponsor, the MTA is not going to do anything. They didn't really want to build Second Avenue. They didn't want to build the 7 train extension, but it was Sheldon Silver, who recently passed, who got Second Avenue, got the money for that, and he pushed that. And it was Bloomberg that got the 7 built. And so on their own, the MTA is not going to do anything. They don't really exist to expand transit. They exist to run transit and give people jobs, which, is important too. And so we think that, it behooves us as the advocates to keep the fire under the MTA, to keep them honest, because they're not going to do it themselves. And so the reason, let me see if I can also, let's see, there we go. All right, this chart shows you what we're talking about in terms of the discrepancies, and this kind of gets in the weeds here. There's 2 colors. You got the green down here, and you got the red orange up here. This is the MTA's cost assessment for the subway reactivation, $8.1 billion. This dashed line shows the cutoff between actual hard construction costs. We're talking, like paying people to build it, moving dirt, moving concrete, that type of thing. What is it going to cost? That type of thing. And their actual cost wasn't that outrageous. It was about $1.6 billion. It was in this other section here, this top section, where they could really fudge the numbers. It's stuff that most people don't, we didn't understand it. Most people don't understand it. They're vague terms: year of expenditure, escalation, unallocated contingency, professional services. Those aren't real numbers. Those are numbers that they made up that said basically, if this project takes X number of years to build, what do we have to factor? How can we factor inflation into that cost? If this project goes over budget and we have to set up a contingency account, what is that going to look like? Well, those are just guesses. They just inflated those numbers because no one was going to question what they meant. And the way that we were able to catch that is that if a city or state is going to propose a transportation project to the federal government to get federal funding, you have to go through a set of rules, a set of algorithms, a set of standards that the federal government can judge your project on. And the way that these numbers were calculated is completely different than how the federal government would ask those numbers to be calculated. And so when we recalculated them based on the federal standards, we came to this much more realistic number of about $3.5 billion. So that's really where the difference is. I have not met someone who has told me, yeah, we did this for XYZ reasons. We just have our suspicions, but we've also proven exactly what they did. So, if this was in a court, we didn't have to prove why, we just proved that they did it. So this is what they did. Why they did it is their own reason. But this hopefully helps people understand that, even the actual cost that the MTA came up with themselves, the actual construction costs, are quite reasonable for this project, at least in terms of New York City standards. Everything here is more expensive than it needs to be.
And Andrew, Jacob Gross, just piggybacking off that, said in our recalculation of the costs, we didn't look to cut corners from going from union to non-union jobs.
Oh, that has nothing to do with it. Literally nothing to do with it. It's literally the only difference that we showed were all these made up numbers. Like I said, it's not the hard construction costs that we were countering. What we would like to do moving forward, once we design this project with the community feedback in mind, is once this proceeds through environmental impact statement, then we're going to know what the real hard costs are. These parks, they might add costs, tunnels are going to add costs, these types of things. And so this is really just a starting point. It's probably going to be one of those things where we come out with an environmental impact statement. We say, oh, it's going to cost this, and people are going to say, oh, the cost went up. It's like, no, it didn't. Everyone right now is just guessing, but they're educated guesses based on similar projects, and that's what we have to keep in mind. And none of this has anything to do with union versus non-union in terms of cost.
I think that's all the questions I had written down. If I don't know if there's anyone else, if you want to.
Since it's 7:30, we've been here about an hour and a half. I just want to thank everyone for joining. Definitely check us out on. Let me get the I'm going to put this slide up one last time. Go to our website. You can contact us through the website by email. You can hit us up on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Any questions that come up, please share us. We're going to put this presentation online. So, you can share this presentation with other people. Yeah, the more people that we can get engaged, the more feedback we can get, the better this is going to be for all people involved. And so I think with that, thank you so much for taking time. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. This is really important for us. So I just want to say one more time, thank you from all the people at QueensLink, and get involved, hit us up, give us feedback, and have a great night.
Thank you all.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for coming and spending your evening with us.
Thank you. Really good job, guys. Amazing. Really good.
Thank you.